Mabuhay, this is Bob from Love Beyond the Sea. My channel is about mostly marriage to a woman from the Philippines, since that's what I did in 2015. But as you'll see, these things, these comments here, could apply to any marriage. I'm going to talk about an article from geediting.com. Tina Fey, I've mentioned her many times. This is about 7 types of men who never deserve a second chance, according to psychology. Now, it's a pretty hard line there. So, and it can go both ways too. So this is the type of behavior, if you're a man, you should avoid. And if you're a woman, you should, if you notice these things, be very careful. And apparently don't be bashful about pulling the trigger. But let me know what you think about this here, and leaving a comment and subscribing to Love Beyond the Sea. The first one they mention here, men, or I could say people who don't deserve a second chance in a relationship, is the perpetual liar. Now, let me, before I forget, mention that there's a difference between going through these evaluations if you're single and married. If you're married, you can't just cut people off because of these things. Now, if they've cheated on you, that's another thing. But in dating, you can just move on. In marriage, I think you have to give more than, one strike if you're married. So the perpetual liar, they say here, we've all told a white lie or two in our lives, but there's a big difference between harmless fib and chronic dishonesty. Psychology classifies compulsive lying as a behavior disorder. It's when a person habitually lies for no apparent reason, creating a web of deceit that is hard to untangle. They say if you're with a man who seems to be bending the truth more often than not, it's time to reconsider. A relationship built on lies will never have a solid foundation. And they continue, lying is one thing that should never be overlooked or justified. It's not about being harsh or unforgiving. It's about respecting your own worth. Well, I would say it's about knowing whether that person is trustworthy or not. When I was dating my wife from, almost 10,000 miles away, she never lied to me as far as I know. There was never a time when I caught her in a lie or stretching the truth. I never thought that, and after meeting her, I never thought that either. Both of us are pretty straightforward when we say things. Doesn't mean we don't get confused now and then, but no, her intention wasn't to lie to me, and I don't see her lying to other people in her life either. I just haven't seen that. Number 2, somebody that they say does not deserve a second chance, the emotional manipulator. And leave a comment here if you've been the victim of this, if you're a woman or a man and you've been the victim of emotional manipulation. They say they'll never forget their encounter with an emotional manipulator. In the early days of their relationship, everything seemed perfect. Says they laughed, shared dreams, made plans. But as time went on, they noticed a shift. They say he would subtly undermine her feelings, making her question her own reality. And he'd make her feel guilty for things she hadn't done. Somehow they would end up apologizing. Psychology tells us this is a classic sign of emotional manipulation. It's a form of psychological control where a person uses tactics like guilt, gaslighting, and passive aggressiveness to control others. They think this man doesn't deserve a second chance. It took a while to realize this, and it was one of the hardest decisions they've ever had to make, and it was necessary for their mental health. I can certainly agree with that. The emotional manipulator should be moved on from. If you're dating, if you're married, you have more of a problem on your hands. And yes, there may be, since marriage is for the long term, you might have to get some counseling involved with this. The third thing they list, someone who doesn't deserve a second chance, according to them, the narcissist. Narcissism isn't just about taking too many selfies, or about being overly obsessed with your looks. It's actually a recognized personality disorder, characterized by a sense of entitlement, a lack of empathy, and a need for constant admiration. In relationships, narcissists often belittle their partners, making them feel worthless and unloved. They demand constant attention and fail to recognize the feelings and needs of their partners. And also says that in studies, they've shown that narcissists are more likely to cheat in their relationships. They're drawn to the thrill of secret affairs and the boost to their egos that cheating provides. So that makes sense. So in marriage, of course, I've always said the focus should be on your wife. If you're a man, build her up, focus on her and her needs and her wants, and make sure that she understands that you have needs and wants too. But she needs to know without any doubt you have her back, you're on her side, and you'll give some things up for her. She doesn't want to have to compete, with anything for your attention. Don't be narcissistic. We have to be unselfish in marriage and in any relationship. Number 4, person who doesn't deserve a second chance, the commitment phobe. There's a difference between taking things slow and outright avoiding commitment. If you're with a man who constantly shies away from discussing the future or making any kind of commitment, it's a clear red flag. Psychology tells us the fear of commitment can stem from various issues like past relationship trauma or insecurity. Regardless of the reason, it can make a meaningful long-term relationship nearly impossible. So when you're dealing with foreigners and Filipinas, sometimes the men can take excessive periods of time to go out there, meet them for the first time. I think anything past a year would probably indicate you're not really, really serious about that person. Anything longer than a year, it's like, what are you waiting for? You don't have to run out there the next day after your first conversation and meet them. That would probably also show some recklessness. Now, I met my wife like 35 days, I think, after we met, but I'd been single for a long time, got married at 53, was alone for a very long time, and I felt like I knew what I was getting into, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so we got married in 54 days. That was back in 2015. And I hope to be married to her for the rest of my life. So I'm always telling guys, look, focus on one, be serious about her, go out and meet her. If you're thousands of miles apart, if you don't have the money for that, you have to come up with it, because there's cost for flying and staying there. The visa, which comes later, it can be quite expensive. Number 5 here, the unapologetic cheater. And they talk about a time of infidelity in their experience, and they thought they would never get hurt by this person, but they did. And they mention cheating is a breach of trust that cuts deep. It's not just about the act itself, but also the lies and deceit that accompany it. Now, to save time, cheating hurts. If you're dating somebody who's cheating, I can see that being a one and done. If it's in marriage, well, the Bible gives you the right to divorce your spouse if there is, fornication, which is sexual sin, like adultery, because the relationship, from a trust standpoint, is all but over at that point. You've broken a very, very sacred and solid bond between two people by having sex with someone else. The relationship is pretty much shot to pieces. Now, it doesn't mean that they all, they all get destroyed, but I think most of them do at that point. 6, the constant critic. Constant criticism. I'll just say what I think here. Nobody likes to be criticized all the time, and if you're giving criticism and somehow thinking that you're helping them, you might want to ask them if they feel that you are. 7, the last one, the serial ghoster. It's a modern phenomenon, ghosting. Someone suddenly cuts off all communication without any explanation. And it's a clear sign of disrespect and disregard for the other person's feelings. If a man ghosts you once, it's already a red flag, they say. And if he does it repeatedly, it's a pattern. A pattern that shows he doesn't respect or value you enough to communicate openly. You see this a lot with foreigner and Filipinas. You're talking to somebody and then all of a sudden they disappear. You wonder why. Are they talking to somebody else? Did they lose interest? Just don't want to tell you. I think, men and women can both do it. They start talking to other people, and if it doesn't work out, they go back to the first person, and, that's just no good. So anyway, let me know what you think about these traits of people who should not be given a second chance in a relationship by leaving a comment here on Love Beyond the Sea.